Freddy, sailor of the seas. You pay no rent. Free to go where you please. Then go.
So, when I was 14, I was sent to a troubled teen group home in Wyoming. What happened was one morning at 1 a.m., two security guards barged into my room and they picked me up, told me to get out of bed, grabbed both of my arms. They escorted me down to a car and they drove me 8 hours from my home state to Wyoming. Now, what was intended to be a sort of safe space for troubled youth was, in reality, a human trafficking cult. And of course, the program owner, he knew what he was doing, and that was why we were isolated in a very remote part of Wyoming. Our communication with the outside world was limited. We weren't given free access to the internet or cell phones. All of the letters that I sent to and from my friends and family were read to make sure that we didn't speak out about the program. Now, ironically, for many modern men, and I think including myself, their loneliness and lack of connection is oftentimes exacerbated by or even caused by having easy access to technology and the internet. Modern media tells us that having lots of friends, being a social butterfly, is the only way to lead a happy and fulfilling life. And moreover, having constant access to the news, which is generally negative, and seeing reports of war and tragedy, and it really gives, especially me, a very pessimistic outlook on life. And on the contrary, while at the troubled teen group home, I was essentially cut off from the outside world. I began to sort of detach from my friends and family as the distance between me and them began to grow. I really kind of stopped feeling actual pain from the abuse I was enduring because I had a lack of exterior stimuli from the outside world. And it actually made it easier for me to deal with being there because I was able to enter this state of comfortable delusion. No, of course, I wouldn't trade my current position for what I was dealing with out there for the world. But even still, if one's internal experience and perception of what's happening around them is really all that matters, then why am I so adamant about this current position I'm in being so much more preferable? What is more real? Was it my perception of what was going on at that time or my perspective towards it now? So what is exactly ultimate loneliness? Let's talk about it. I live my entire life on the internet and through a screen. As it stands, if I were to lose access to the internet and technology, I would have to spend my days sitting on the floor and staring at the ceiling. These pastimes are the only thing that fill in the empty void inside me. But alternatively, while I was in Wyoming, this was the exact opposite. So to give some specifics, most of the media we consumed was like doing Bible studies. 2 to 3 times a week, every single morning, we would have to read our Bible for 15 minutes. We were only allowed to read certain books that were curated by the owner that sort of fit with his worldview. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, we would watch these Bible videos about how great God and Christianity is. Personally, I'm an atheist. They weren't able to convert me, but I don't view someone who is a Christian negatively because of that experience. But their brand of Christianity and how they tried to force it down our throats was not good. We were also only allowed to listen to Christian music on the radio. We didn't have unsupervised access to technology, and we could only watch movies that were approved by the staff members. So basically only Christian, religious, and educational movies. And we were also over 2 hours away from the nearest city. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. We were, as in the myself and the boys who were there, almost existed in a sort of alternate reality where the tragedies, events, and happenings of the outside world basically didn't exist to us. And for me, being entirely removed from things outside of that ranch, it became like impossible for me to comprehend the state of isolation that I was in. And this is what I mean when I refer to ultimate loneliness. It is a type of loneliness where one is able to comprehend or understand or even feel the loneliness or make sense of the loneliness simply because they have no exterior point of comparison to juxtapose one's position in and help make sense of their surroundings and the environment that they're in. They are simultaneously the least fulfilled and most fulfilled people. Now, many people wonder what the world would look like today if we never globalize, if we never experience the Industrial Revolution, or if we all just were still living in small tribes and we didn't have technology and our entire world was basically just like 20 or 30 people in like a small little patch of land. And the thing is, I did live like that for 14 months, and I know what it's like. And I think there's some validity to people who hold opinions against, modern, how our modern world is set up. Something, for example, like what you would find in the Unabomber's Manifesto, the first sentence. The effects of the industrial, I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's something like the effects of the Industrial Revolution have been a disaster for the human race. And there is some validity to that, I think. But for me, at least, the interconnectedness and access to basically any information I could possibly ask for gives my life a sort of richness that I wouldn't trade for the world. And this is just a sort of hypothetical thing, because this is a rarely, in almost any cases, this doesn't really exist anymore. But, by living inside of a delusional and isolated bubble and having, no way to position yourself in a broader context, you can make your reality anything you want it to be. It can be as amazing or as horrible as you decide to label it as. And moreover, the people who live in these delusional bubbles, they have to actively work towards filtering out any information to maintain their hollowed out sort of cocoons of sanctity and safety they've made for themselves. And I think that for someone who is doing this to themselves voluntarily, their bubble will either ultimately burst or they will render themselves ultimately into a constant state of misery. You really have to pick your poison in this scenario. I think that it's unavoidable to have access to technology and the internet in the modern age. Of course, you can limit it, significantly, but the key is to find a balance where you are using technology as much as possible because it is an incredible gift, but no more than that, because at the same time, the more you use it, the better it is, and simultaneously, the more harm it has on your psyche. Coinciding with the phenomena of alienation that is commonplace due to technology, there's something else that's going on too. And it's our culture's obsession with presenting a sort of fake and too good to be true image of ourselves online that is far different from who we actually are when no one else is looking. And I would like to believe that I don't put on a fake front. And while I definitely don't think I do, what I can say is that this is something I did basically 24/7 while I was in Wyoming. Let me explain. After about 2 days of being in Wyoming, I came to this immediate and very intense realization that I would have to do everything in my power to get out of this living hell as quickly as possible. So in order to progress as quickly as possible, I had to complete work projects that I was forced to do, comply with all of the owner's demands, and not say anything negative about the program. And of course, I despised all of this, and I thought that I was a horrible injustice that I was sent here, but I knew that projecting that attitude and making it visible to the program owner would mean that I would never get out. And so I vowed to adopt a fake persona and wear it at all times while from the time I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to the time that we all went to bed at 11 p.m. And I view it as sort of that I grew a temporary fake skin that appeased the owner of the program. But even still, my true self was always hidden beneath this costume I wore, and I shed that costume the second I left the program. Or at least, this is what I like to think of it as. If I'm being completely honest, there are certain ways in which putting on a mask for 14 months has tainted my personality permanently, and its effects can still be seen to this day. What this taught me was that it is not possible to maintain a completely fake personality for an extended period of time without either completely snapping or having the line between your fake self and your true self start to blur. And I didn't simply act outwardly compliant to the program. In fact, in my mind, I actually told myself that I loved the program and actually believed everything that it was trying to shove down my throat. Simultaneously, I did this on purpose, and it was to attempt to project the most authentic seeming caricature of myself that I could. And yet I still knew all along what I was doing and was aware that deep down I hated the program. It was as if I was consciously unconscious of my true, authentic resentment towards the program. Alongside all this, I began to worry that all of this mental distortion was beginning to alter who I really was deep down. And it really shows how horrible that place was, that I was essentially willing to voluntarily brainwash myself in order to get out of there as quickly as I could. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes from living this way for so long. The only true friend I had was myself. My true self, after everyone had gone to bed. It was the only time I could think about and interact with my real authentic self and live with my own thoughts in peace and quiet while everyone else was in bed and asleep. I would force myself to stay up late into the night. I would have many long late night contemplations with myself, but I never did this for more than an hour at the time because I needed 8 hours of sleep at a minimum in order to function because the work was so strenuous. And the subtle effects of doing this to this day are when I go to do schoolwork and when I go to do manual labor and work jobs, I default into this mentality that I have to work as quickly as possible, as hard as possible, and harder than everyone else. And if I don't, I will get yelled and screamed at and punished severely. And I had this sort of panic mindset that my mind defaults to. And I have never been able to completely, I've been able to diminish its effects over time, but it's never completely gone away. And I think I might have to live with that for the rest of my life. During the daytime, I quite literally had no one. I had no one to talk to. I rarely kept in contact with my parents or my friends. And because I was putting on a fake persona, none of the connections I had with the staff members or the other boys there were completely real. So during the daytime, I did not even have myself to be friends with, because no matter what, no matter how lonely you are, usually you would think that you always have yourself. But I didn't even have myself during the daytime, at least. And I only got 1 hour with myself at night, and sometimes less. That was it. And this is a sort of loneliness that is so different in form and feeling and texture and shape than anything that, you might experience anywhere else. And I think that there is a sort of diluted form of that when you present a fake form of yourself to, your friends and your family and Instagram. And I think in some ways, who we are behind all the masks that we put on is completely different. But at the same time, no matter how many masks you're wearing, there's still some of your true authentic self in that. But in my case, none of my authentic self was in the mask that I was portraying. So I was truly all alone. Most people hate their jobs, and this is an undeniable fact. I can back this up. I hate working. I've hated every single job I've ever worked in my entire life. And much of my aversion towards working comes from what happened to me while I was in Wyoming. And like I said earlier, this place I was sent to was nothing like it was advertised. It was really a forced labor camp that was designed to exploit children for their labor without paying them. The nature of the work I did was very blue-collar. I would honestly say many to most kids in America today have never and will never have to work or experience any sort of blue-collar work or be in a blue-collar sort of position. Now, maybe they'll work a couple of jobs in high school, but it's not, doing really, grueling, manual, heavy lifting labor. That's something that most kids don't in America don't have to do, especially if you're from a suburban or urban area. And some people, especially older, like conservatives, they think that kids today are not exposed enough to hard manual labor jobs, then that these sort of positions, they build character, whatever that means, and that they teach, humility and work ethic. And while there might be some validity to this, the proponents of these types of jobs, they failed to acknowledge a cold, hard reality that manual labor, especially heavy lifting manual labor, sucks. In my opinion, it's ultimately degrading and it makes one feel expendable. So what kind of work did I have to do? I had to haul hundreds of bales of heavy alfalfa and hay. I had to stack them. I had to pick hundreds of rocks off fields. I had to irrigate farm fields. I had to lift heavy irrigation pipe. We would work with our neighbor's sheep, and we would help move his sheep. We would help castrate his sheep. We would move around some of his electric fencing to help herd his sheep. We would move some of the program owner's horses around. We would fix his fence around his property. We would go to this camp he had up in Montana, and we would dig post holes for him. And we were all forced to do this while he sat there just watching us with his hands in his pockets doing nothing. And what would happen to me when I didn't do this? Well, there were a variety of punishments that he would employ. I was never tortured in such a way where the Department of Family Services could really call it like actual like physical abuse. So I would be, sometimes if I didn't do the work, they would force us to run disciplinary runs in the rain, wind, and snow. And you had to do it fast enough. You also had to run them in hiking boots and jeans. And if you did not run them fast enough, you would have to do another one immediately afterwards. And so they would basically force you to sprint over and over in the rain and the wind and the snow until basically to the point of having a heart attack. Some boys, when they got in a lot of trouble, they would have to stand in a corner for 12 hours every single day. They were not allowed to talk. The only way that they could communicate was by writing questions on a 3x5 note card, and they only got one note card for the whole day. They were forced to eat solitary meals, which is a mixture of beets and cornstarch, and they had to eat it in 5 minutes. If they didn't eat it in 5 minutes, they got another one. They also had to do, I never had to do this, thankfully, because I was compliant, but they also were forced to do push-ups, and they were basically treated like. And the worst of all, if you were repeatedly not complying, the program owner would extend your stay by months at a time. Every single day I was faced with the brutal reality that I was being actively exploited and that I could do nothing about it. And being forced to do this work and basically being treated like a made me feel subhuman and like I was a machine. But the physical exertion and pain from doing this grueling manual labor, it's nothing compared to the mental and psychological toll that this has on someone. I think that forced labor is one of the ultimate evils. It is actively exploiting someone for a profit and treating them like they are dirt. Now, actual manual labor isn't evil like what I was experiencing, but at the same time, however marginally, when you work for someone else, you are, however slightly, actively being exploited and being profited off of. And the only way that you can be freed from this in a capitalist society is to either work for yourself and be self-employed or be unemployed. Now, transitioning from this ranch back to real life was incredibly challenging. I found it hard to relate to other people and view them as my equals. For so long, I got so used to being treated as if I was subhuman that I didn't view myself as an equal to my peers. And I felt like an alien walking around with my friends when I got back home. Now, over time, I was able to sort of, shed this burden for myself and feel like I was on par with everyone else around me. But this is why I'm so hesitant towards getting a job, is that I worry that by working, especially a sort of blue-collar, manual labor occupation, even if it's not as bad as what I did up there, that I will slowly revert back to this old mentality and alienate myself from society even more. I think that there is an inherent pain and loneliness and emptiness and hollowness in growing up, leaving your childhood behind, going to school, trade school, whatever, and spending 4 decades of your life working a job that ultimately you wouldn't do if you weren't being paid to do it. And this is my warped perspective on things, and you can disagree, but it's what I think. And of course, we technically aren't forced to work these jobs, but in reality we are, because you can not work a job, but then you won't have money to pay for anything. And so really, if you look at it that way, we're all essentially serfs to the capitalist system. Very, very Marxist of me. And my experience in Wyoming, I think, symbolizes this. In its most extreme form, when you are being directly forced to work and being directly exploited, you adopt this character and self-image that is so degrading, I could just never convey it to you. And I think that by experiencing this in its most extreme form, I know that no matter what, when you're working a job, unless you absolutely love it and it's something you're genuinely passionate about, there is always this inherent loneliness, even if it isn't so subtle and immediately clear. Okay, we're at the end. So I don't have much else to say at this point. I appreciate if you've actually watched all the way to the end. That means a lot. And I know that I covered a lot of dark and heavy stuff. It is, in a way, hard for me to come out with this publicly, but I think it's important for people who have experienced what I've experienced to share our stories and for people to understand what really goes on at these types of places. So I hope this didn't ruin your day, and thank you.
Go to that landless latitude. And good luck. For if you figure a way to live without serving a master, any master, then let the rest of us know, will you? For you be the first person in the history of the world